during my usual YouTube perusing, I came across this video, Fairy Grotto Finder, Hypixel Skyblock, Nightly. And this thing has a gem of a thumbnail. You know I had to click. I was expecting it to just straight be a rat, but from what I saw, it doesn't seem to be a rat. I still wouldn't run it. But what I did find is that it is definitely AI code, which is maybe the worst thing ever. I hate AI code, for it's ruined my life. Why are we using dev comments? No one else is using this code, bro. This is a bit over professional. He's using capital letters. He's using M dash. You know, normally for dev comments as well, people use free slashes because the majority of people writing Java use IntelliJ, and IntelliJ allows free slashes as opposed to // and end it with //. He has results here. This has a comment. It should be intuitive what results does. In fact, if it's just returning results, you could use @getter, assuming he has Lombok, which I mean, most people should because it allows you to have all logs constructor, which he obviously isn't using. For getting the blocks, he's doing registries.block.get, and he's getting it from the block ID, which returns a block class. So let's see this. This returns a block class. Why doesn't he just use the magenta stained glass pane from here? Let's see where scan task is executed. Menu. Oh, that's a great place to execute it from. I wonder why it's in menu. It's called when you click the button. It's not just permanently scanning. You gotta manually click a button, which is boring. Why would you want to manually click a button when you can just do it, you know, constantly? It can't be damaging your FPS that much. How has he possibly done this? Every time you click that button, it's scanned in a 20 chunk radius around you, from X0 to X16 in the chunk and Y0 to Y256 in the chunk, or whatever it is in 1.20, minus 32 to 312, something like that. That's a hell of a lot of blocks to be scanning. If you're just constantly scanning it, you can scan when a new chunk appears, which means it's not that FPS heavy. AI code is just brilliant. I left my hate comment, because I hate all the time. He says, first off, no need to judge my code styles. I can type comments however I like. In this comment, I actually called it a block comment. That's not a block comment. This is a dev comment because it has the extra one, which means that it comes up with, like, when you hover it, it comes up with this comment. He didn't call me out on that, so I assume he didn't know that either. And I respond, the AI is, the code's very clearly AI. It's having to click a button's boring, and he just says, hating just to hate, I guess. And I've mentioned it's still really experimental. What do you mean it's experimental? It should just work. You run it once. They're not changing how fairy grottos spawn. This should just work. I have to put it in my own hands. I have to make my own. I'll make it in under an hour. How about that, huh? I'll make it in 10 minutes. Right? So I did. Right, you gotta start the speedrun clock here. We create a project. We have to pick a good name for it. We have to pick Fabric 1.20.11 because that's the version he decided to make his in. And mine's gotta be a competitor. I can't be using 26.1 or whatever it is now. We can't be using latest versions. Has to compete. We change it. Go on. We don't use the official mappings. Official mappings suck, and I hate them. Actually, IntelliJ hates me here, and it when I opened the project, it did IDE error. I was devastated. For some reason, it decided to pick the wrong Gradle version. It decided we should be using 9.2.1 when we should be using 9.4.0. But it did give a massive error log, which was rather helpful, I guess. IntelliJ decided to waste even more time in this very important speedrun by downloading a bunch of files, which I was devastated about. This is a terrible time loss. I think now's as good a time as any to explain what the mod actually does and how it plans to work. How it works is, in the Crystal Hollows, the only magenta-stained glass panes that can spawn are in these fairy grottos, which people are looking for. So to detect where a fairy grotto is, you just have to scan the entire world around you for magenta-stained glass panes. The way the AI chose to do this is that when you click the button, it scans the entire world, which actually doesn't work on Hypixel as they limit your render distance to 8 chunks, meaning you have to move and then do it all again several times. I don't plan to do. I want it to run constantly, which means I'm able to just detect when a chunk loads and specifically load that chunk, and then if a block changes as well, and if that block becomes a magenta stained glass pane, it must be a fairy grotto. Here I've created a class which works as a mix-in for the Minecraft chunk class, which allows me to edit the functions inside of the Minecraft chunk class and edit private variables and all that. And here what I use it for is to detect when a chunk loads. Minecraft creates a new chunk, so on init, which is when the chunk is created, I handle the chunk loading. The inject annotation means that I am adding to the function, whereas overwrite allows you to overwrite it and redirect allows you to change the variable it returns. Within the inject, I am able to pick where I would like it to inject. So here I use @tail because I want the chunk to already have been loaded when I start passing it for myself. But you can also use @head, @return, and @invoke and @field, which allow you to inject whenever a specific method or specific variable are called. So here, whenever a chunk is called, I want to loop through the entire chunk and check every single block to see if any of them are a magenta stained glass. So to loop through the entire chunk, we start from the chunk pos times 16 on both the X and Z, because chunks are 16 by 16, and then we go until 16 blocks after, which loops through the whole X and Z axis, and then on the Y axis we loop from the very bottom of the world, which we can get from a function world.getBottom, to the top of the world, which we get from world.getHeight plus the bottom. And then we can get the block at each position and compare if it's a magenta glass, and if it is, boom, we found it, set some magical variable saying we found it, and that's it. That's the entire scanning. In theory, you don't really need the block change event either, but I like to be precise. Making the block change detection is even easier than making the chunk loading one. Make a mix in, we inject onto the block change event, and then we check what the block changed into, and if it's magenta glass, we're done. There's nothing more to it. Since the code stops scanning after it finds the very first magenta glass pane, that obviously won't work after it finds one and then switches worlds, so we're going to need to make it forget about the one it found every time we switch worlds, which is very simple to do. It's in the same mix-in as the block change event. Now this should have worked, however, in the chunk load we rely on a Minecraft.getInstance.getWorld because we assume that, the world should be there when we're loading a chunk, but it isn't on the first chunk we load. Great, so let's change that then. So now whenever the chunk load is called, we queue that chunk to be scanned next time the player ticks, and the player can only tick when they're in a world. Ironically, in my original comment when I suggested that he do this, I said you wouldn't need to async it because that would have been done in the chunk load, which is already async, so you wouldn't need to do your own. But here, since I'm now doing it in the Minecraft tick, I am going to need to async it. I don't need to, but yeah, it helps FPS. I don't want to be FPS impacted by this. I want it to just run in the background. So to async it, I use fork common join pool, although I know a lot of people use executors or new thread. I honestly don't know the difference between fork common join pools. It's just what I've always used, I guess, as the first way I learned how to async. So what we do is we create a pool, and then we do .execute, and then we put the code that we want to run async in it. We also don't want it to have multiple running at the same time, so we're going to check when it's running, and then when it's finished running we're going to reset that variable to be false so that multiple aren't running at the same time, because there's no point scanning the same chunks at the same time. And as you can see, it just works. I join and bang, it immediately finds it. That's it, let's go home. At least that's how I was going to end the project, 20 minutes wasted, but then I realised that his mod renders a line pointing towards the nearest magenta stained glass, and I was like, what? I've been outdone, because my mod doesn't do that. My mod just says it above your HUD. So we had to fix that. We cannot be getting beat by this AI booster. I sadly decided not to make the rendering from scratch, since I've already made the rendering code in another mod before. I copy-pasted it straight over, because the rendering code in 1.20 is so weird to work with. I didn't want to have to rediscover all of it again since I made this code whenever 1.21.11 first came out. And wow guys, would you look at that? It's working. This is so swag. So I played around with the rendering a little bit more after this, and I made a toggle command which I just stole from my NoRotate mod as well as the config saving. And I think it's about time to test the FPS impact. Here's me running around with it disabled. The mod's doing nothing except keeping track of which chunks are currently loaded, which is literally no FPS impact. As you can see, thanks to the power of async, it has absolutely zero FPS impact. Even when it's turned on first, it has to scan all of the chunks that it, loaded while it was turned off, and it still doesn't have an FPS impact. Here I turn it on while the glass pane is out of render distance, and as you'll see, the second it comes in render distance, it immediately pops up without me having to push a button to find it. Wow, the wonders of not using AI to code. As I said at the start, the code's all in the description if you want to go have a look at it. I hope it helps people not use AI in the future, because I'm not personally a huge fan of AI. I was also informed a day late that there is like 10 specific coordinates that magenta stained glass panes can be spawned at, so I have to blacklist them from the scanning, which I haven't recorded coding, so see you later. Like, subscribe, share, post on Facebook, retweet.